The tires of my truck crunched over gravel as I eased down the narrow mountain road. Pine branches arched overhead, blotting out the late afternoon sun in a patchwork of shifting shadows. Every curve of this road was familiar, yet distant, like a song you hadn't heard in years but could still hum along to. It had been more than a decade since I'd last driven this way. 10 years since I'd laid eyes on my family's cabin, my grandfather's pride, my father's sanctuary, and for me, the last piece of home I had left after everything went sideways in the city. I inhaled deeply. The mountain air was cool and sharp, tinged with pine resin, damp earth, and that faint metallic edge that always preceded winter. I told myself I was ready to face the memories, the ghosts, maybe even the loneliness of coming back here. What I wasn't ready for was what I saw when the trees opened up to reveal the valley floor. I slammed the brakes, heart stuttering. The cabin, my cabin, wasn't waiting for me in quiet solitude like I remembered. Smoke puffed lazily from the chimney. A shiny black SUV with vanity plates sat out front, the kind of car that screamed suburban money, not mountain grit. And scattered across the porch were signs of life that didn't belong. A child's tricycle, a half-deflated basketball, plastic toys tossed in careless heaps. Someone was here, living here, in my cabin. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles whitened. What the hell? The slam of a screen door snapped me from my daze. Out stepped a woman in her late 50s, platinum blonde hair teased high and lacquered stiff with hairspray. Her cream-colored pantsuit looked absurd against the backdrop of mud, pine needles, and mountain stone. A clipboard hugged her chest like it was a badge of authority. Her eyes, cold, calculating, and already narrowed, landed on me like I was trespassing in her kingdom. "Excuse me," she barked, voice sharp as broken glass.
Can I help you?
"Because this is private property. You can't just drive up here like you own the place." I pushed open the truck door and stepped out slowly, boots sinking into soft earth. "Lady," I said, trying to keep the growl out of my voice, "I do own this place." Her laugh was short, clipped, and absolutely humorless. "Wrong. This cabin is part of the High Pines Homeowners Association, of which I am the president." She tapped her clipboard for emphasis. "It has been reassigned." Her painted lips curled into a smug smile. "To my son," I blinked. "You did what?" As if on cue, a lanky man in his 20s shuffled onto the porch. He wore ripped jeans, a backwards cap, and had the entitled smirk of someone who'd never worked an honest day in his life. He held a soda can and leaned against the railing like he owned the damn mountain. "Hey, Ma," he called lazily. "Who's the hick in the truck?" Karen, because that name fit her like a glove, lifted her chin. "This gentleman seems to think this cabin belongs to him." The kid snorted. "Yeah, right. It's ours now. Iowa rules, man. Mom gave it to me." My pulse hammered. "Listen carefully. My grandfather built this cabin with his bare hands. My father kept it standing. It's been in my family for 60 years. I've got the deed in my glove box right now." Karen waved her clipboard like a sword. "Oh, we don't recognize old deeds anymore. The HOA absorbed all properties within the valley. We decide ownership, usage, and," she smiled wider, "who's allowed to live here." My jaw clenched so hard it ached. I marched back to my truck, rummaged through the glove box, and pulled out a worn manila folder. Inside were my grandfather's papers, yellowed with age but preserved carefully. I flipped it open and held up the first sheet, the deed itself. "See this? James Whitaker. My grandfather. Passed down to my father, then to me. Legal and binding." Karen barely glanced at it.
Invalid?
She declared, her voice dripping with condescension. The HOA voted. "This is community property now. Case closed." That's when I pulled out the second sheet. It wasn't ordinary paper. The heading bore the official seal of the United States Department of Justice. The words across the top were clear: federal property. "Restricted access." Karen's smugness faltered for just a flicker, but her son leaned forward, squinting. "What's that supposed to mean?" "This cabin," I said evenly, "was leased to the Federal Bureau of Investigation in 1998. It's been maintained as a satellite property ever since, which means technically it doesn't belong to me or to you. It belongs to the FBI." For a long beat, the mountain air seemed to hold its breath. Then Karen exploded with laughter, a shrill, grating cackle that echoed off the trees. "Oh, you have got to be kidding me," she said, fanning her face with her clipboard. "This is rich. Did you type that up yourself? What are you, some kind of wannabe secret agent?" The FBI doesn't run cabins in the woods. Her son joined in, nearly choking on his soda. Yeah, nice Photoshop, dude. You a conspiracy nut? Next you'll tell us Bigfoot pays rent here. I didn't laugh. Not even a twitch. Because behind them, mounted discreetly beneath the porch eaves, I spotted something they hadn't noticed. A camera. Small. Black. Military grade. Its lens blinked red. Active. And in that instant, I knew. This wasn't just an old forgotten lease. The FBI still had eyes on this place. I tucked the papers back into the folder. No sense showing my whole hand yet. Believe what you want, I said, voice low. But I'm not leaving. This cabin is mine, and it damn sure isn't yours. Karen's painted smile snapped into a scowl. We'll see about that. I'll have the sheriff up here before nightfall. Squatters aren't welcome in High Pines. She spun on her heel and barked at her son. Lock the doors. And don't let this man inside. He smirked, gave me a mock salute, and disappeared into the cabin. I stayed outside, leaning against my truck, staring at the familiar wood beams of the porch. My porch. Memories tugged at me. Nights by the fire with Dad, mornings on the lake with my grandfather. But all of it was eclipsed by the bitter taste in my mouth. Karen had no idea what she was playing with. She thought she was running an HOA empire, queen of her little valley kingdom. But she'd just trespassed onto federal ground, and if the FBI caught wind of her gifting this property to her deadbeat son, her reign was about to collapse. As twilight crept over the ridge, the valley fell into shadow. Crickets sang. A cold wind whispered through the pines, and then I heard it. An engine. Not the whine of a sheriff's cruiser, not the rattle of an old pickup. A deep, throaty rumble. More than one. Headlights appeared at the far end of the road. Black SUVs. Karen thought she'd won, but she didn't see what I saw. The FBI was already here. The valley had always been quiet at night. When I was a kid, you could lie on the porch and hear nothing but the hoot of an owl, the whisper of the wind through the pines, maybe the distant crack of a branch from a deer wandering through. But that night, the quiet felt hostile. Every sound carried tension. Every shadow seemed to lean in close, listening. Because I knew, and Karen didn't, that the FBI was watching. The 3 black SUVs I'd seen roll down the road earlier hadn't stopped at the cabin. They had parked farther down, just out of sight, engines humming low. No one had stepped out, no doors had opened. They were waiting, watching, and Karen had no clue. The next morning, I woke to the sound of voices echoing across the valley. Curious, I followed the noise to the old community hall, a rundown lodge that had once hosted potlucks and fishing tournaments. Now it looked like Karen's throne room. She stood at the front, clipboard in hand, barking orders to a room full of uneasy neighbors. Some sat stiff-backed, nodding in fearful agreement. Others slouched low, eyes darting like they didn't want to be seen there at all. Order, order, Karen snapped, slamming her clipboard against the podium. As president of the High Pines Homeowners Association, I am addressing a serious violation of our community rules. A trespasser has attempted to seize control of my son's property. Her son sat smugly in the front row, baseball cap tipped back, arms crossed like a prince awaiting his crown. That man, Karen jabbed a manicured finger toward me as I stepped into the hall, is not a rightful resident of this valley. He is a squatter. He waved fake papers in my face, claiming this land is FBI property. FBI, can you imagine? She laughed high and sharp. A few sycophants echoed her, though most of the room stayed quiet. I crossed my arms. It isn't fake. You're making a mistake. Karen's eyes narrowed to slits. Mistake? The only mistake here is you thinking you can waltz in after abandoning this community for years and claim ownership. A murmur rippled through the crowd. I caught the eye of Mrs. Langley, a sweet old woman who used to bake me pies when I was a boy. She looked torn, wringing her hands. Beside her, Mr. Johnson, who once fished with my father, stared at the floor. Fear. That's what Karen thrived on. She had everyone here afraid to speak against her. Karen strutted across the room, heels clicking on the wood floor. I have filed paperwork with the county registrar. My son is the lawful resident of that cabin. This man is nothing more than a criminal squatter. And as HOA president, I will not tolerate lawlessness in High Pines. She slapped a stack of papers onto a table. Flyers, already printed, already distributed. I picked one up. Bold letters screamed, "Warning. Fraudulent trespasser in High Pines, do not engage. Report immediately, and beneath it. My face. A grainy photo snapped while I was standing by my truck yesterday. Are you kidding me? I growled. Karen smiled sweetly like a shark. Community safety, dear. Can't have strangers lurking about. When I returned to the cabin later, my stomach dropped. Karen's son and a few of his buddies were already at work. A pickup was parked out front, its bed loaded with tools. They were ripping boards off the porch, tossing them into a pile like scrap. Inside, I could hear the crash of furniture being moved, glass shattering. Hey, I roared, storming forward. What the hell do you think you're doing? The son leaned out the doorframe, grinning. Renovations, man. Gotta make this place livable. Mom says it's mine now, so I'm fixing it up. You're destroying it, he shrugged. Same difference. Behind him, one of his friends pried at the wall paneling. A faint metallic clang echoed. Not wood, but something hidden beneath. My gut twisted. The cabin wasn't just walls and timber anymore. It had been modified, reinforced. Those panels hid FBI tech, surveillance gear, secure lines. Who knows what else? And these idiots were tearing it apart. That's when I saw it again. The small black camera tucked under the eaves. Yesterday, the light had blinked lazily. Now, it glowed solid red, active, recording, transmitting. I felt the hairs on my neck rise. Somewhere in a room full of monitors, federal agents were watching every move Karen's son made. Every board he pried loose, every hidden wire he exposed, every careless swing of his hammer. And the more he tampered, the closer we came to a storm none of us could stop. That night I went door to door trying to reason with my old neighbors. Mrs. Langley cracked her door just enough to whisper, "Oh, honey, I believe you. But if I say anything, Karen will triple my HOA fees. I'm on a fixed income. I can't risk it." Mr. Johnson sighed heavily, shaking his head. "I know your family owned that cabin, but Karen's got the sheriff in her pocket. You go against her, you'll lose." Others didn't even open their doors. Lights flicked off as I knocked. Curtains twitched shut. Fear. Always fear. Karen had poisoned this valley, twisting community into tyranny. But not everyone was against me. Late that night, a knock came at my truck window where I'd been dozing. I startled awake to see a young man, one of the newer residents, glancing nervously over his shoulder. "I just want you to know," he whispered. "My wife and I, we don't buy Karen's story. We know you belong here." And he hesitated, then handed me something. "This showed up in my mailbox today. Thought you should see it." I unfolded the paper. Another flyer. This one different. It wasn't Karen's propaganda. It was a warning. A printed notice stamped with the seal I recognized from the DOJ federal investigation in progress. "Do not interfere with property at Lot 17 to Lot 17, my cabin." The next morning, Karen doubled down. She stood at the end of the gravel road with her clipboard army, blocking my truck from reaching the cabin. "Until further notice," she declared, "you are forbidden from entering. This is HOA property." Her son leaned against the porch railing in the distance, hammer dangling from his hand. Behind him I saw more damage. Walls gutted. Floorboards ripped. A pile of broken electronics stacked outside, FBI tech. I swallowed hard. They were dismantling federal property piece by piece, and then the rumble. Engines, low, steady, approaching. The crowd of neighbors turned as 3 black SUVs crept down the road, tires crunching gravel, windows dark and opaque. They didn't stop. They rolled slowly, deliberately, until they came to a halt in front of the cabin. Doors opened in unison. Men in dark suits stepped out, sunglasses reflecting the morning sun. Karen's smirk faltered. Her son's hammer clattered to the porch, and I just stood there, arms crossed, thinking, "Game over, Karen." The SUVs sat like black beasts in the morning mist, their engines purring low, steady, predatory. Every eye in the valley was fixed on them. Neighbors who had come to watch Karen's spectacle shuffled uneasily, some clutching their coffee mugs like talismans, others whispering prayers under their breath. The cabin loomed behind Karen's son, gutted, half destroyed, pieces of furniture and electronics tossed onto the grass like carcasses. He stood frozen on the porch, hammer still dangling in his hand. Then, in one seamless motion, the SUV doors opened. 4 men stepped out, dressed in dark suits, ties crisp despite the mountain dust. Their movements were precise, synchronized, the kind of discipline that didn't come from corporate jobs or county offices. These weren't local cops. They weren't sheriff's deputies. These were federal. The lead agent, tall, broad-shouldered, with salt and pepper hair and eyes that scanned the scene like he already owned it, flashed a badge. Special Agent Davis, FBI. For a heartbeat, silence hung over the valley like a held breath. Then Karen did what Karen always did. She charged forward, clipboard clutched like a holy book, chin raised high. "There has been a serious mistake," she declared, her voice cutting through the cold morning air. "This property is under the jurisdiction of the High Pines Homeowners Association. I am the president, and I demand to know why federal agents are trespassing in my community." Davis didn't blink. "Ma'am, this property has been federally designated since 1998. Your son has tampered with restricted equipment." "That's a federal offense," Karen gasped, hand to her chest like she'd been slapped. "Excuse me, tampered?" "He was renovating, making improvements. I don't know what kind of scam you're running, but I will not allow the federal government to bully private citizens." The neighbors shuffled again. A few exchanged nervous glances. Some looked like they wanted to melt into the trees. Davis stepped closer, towering over Karen, though he didn't raise his voice. "Ma'am, you are interfering with an active federal investigation. I strongly suggest you step aside." But Karen, being Karen, only doubled down. "I will not step aside," she screeched. "This is HOA jurisdiction. You can't just barge into our valley and start throwing accusations around. I'll have you know, I've already filed lawsuits against the county sheriff, 3 contractors, and the power company. You think I won't sue the FBI?" While she ranted, her son began to sweat. The hammer slipped from his grip and clattered onto the porch. His eyes darted from the pile of gutted electronics to the agents, to me, then back to his mother. One of the agents, a younger man with a tablet in hand, gestured toward the debris. "Sir, do you realize what you've destroyed here?" The son stammered. I was just... It looked old, man, like junk. Mom said I could fix the place up." Agent Davis crouched, picking up a shattered piece of hardware. To the untrained eye, it might have looked like a busted radio, but when he turned it over, the gleam of military-grade components caught the light. "This isn't junk," Davis said flatly. "This is encrypted surveillance equipment. Government issue," the crowd gasped. Karen's son went pale. I didn't know." "Whether you knew or not," Davis said, his gaze hardening, "tampering with federal property carries serious consequences. You may have compromised an ongoing operation." The word operation rippled through the neighbors like a shockwave. They leaned in, whispering furiously. Some looked frightened, others suspicious. Karen, however, puffed up even bigger. "Don't you dare threaten my son. He has rights. You think you can just waltz in here with your suits and sunglasses and scare us? We're not afraid of you," I muttered under my breath. "You should be." The agents didn't waste time. They split into 2 teams, one heading inside the cabin to assess the damage, the other circling Karen and her son with a wall of quiet authority. Questions came rapid fire. "Who authorized the renovation? When did you enter the cabin? Did you touch anything inside besides the walls and furniture? Did anyone approach you about the property before you moved in?" Karen answered every question with venom. "I authorized it. I filed the paperwork. I reassigned it. And no one approached me because I don't need permission. I run this community." Her son, meanwhile, cracked under the pressure. "Look, man, I didn't know it was government stuff, okay? I thought it was like old wires. Some kind of backup generator or whatever. I swear I didn't mean to mess anything up." The agents ignored Karen's protests, focusing on him. They pulled photos from a folder, grainy surveillance shots of people meeting near the cabin in the dead of night. "You see these men?" one asked, holding the photos inches from his face. "They were under surveillance. You ripped out the equipment monitoring them. That jeopardizes national security. Do you understand what that means?" The son's mouth opened and closed like a fish. He shook his head violently. I swear I didn't." Karen lunged forward, blocking the photo with her clipboard. "Stop interrogating him. He's innocent. If anything, this is your fault for hiding government junk in my cabin." Davis's patience finally cracked. His voice cut like a blade. "Ma'am, this isn't your cabin. This is federal property. And as of this moment, you are both subjects of an active federal investigation." You'd think that would shut Karen up. You'd think the words federal investigation would finally break through her delusion. But no, Karen squared her shoulders, lifted her clipboard, and announced, "Fine. Then I'm filing an official complaint. You are unlawfully harassing HOA leadership. I will draft a lawsuit against the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and I'll win." The crowd actually laughed this time, not with her but at her. Nervous, incredulous laughter. The kind you can't hold back when reality is too absurd to process. "Good luck with that," someone muttered. Karen's face flushed crimson. While she ranted, Agent Davis's team emerged from the cabin, their expressions grim. One carried a hard drive sealed in an evidence bag. Another whispered something in Davis's ear. His jaw tightened. He turned back to Karen, voice low, deliberate. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Karen lifted her chin. "I've protected my son from government overreach." "That's what I've done." Davis shook his head slowly. "No. By interfering with this property, by tampering with our surveillance, you've done something far worse." Karen blinked, confused for the first time. "Worse? What are you talking about?" Davis held up the evidence bag. Inside the hard drive, faint numbers glowed on a digital screen. Coordinates, times, encrypted messages. "You didn't just tamper with our equipment," Davis said. His voice carried across the valley, heavy as stone. "You may have exposed this entire community to a criminal network we've been monitoring for years." The neighbors gasped in unison. Karen's face drained of color. Her son staggered backward, muttering, "No. No, no, no." I clenched my fists, heart pounding. Because in that moment I realized the truth. Karen hadn't just picked a fight with me. She'd picked a fight with the FBI. And now she'd dragged the entire valley into something far darker than HOA politics. The valley had never been so silent, not when storms howled through the pines, not when the wolves called to the moon, not even in the dead of winter when snow buried the cabins in silence. But now, after the FBI's declaration, after Agent Davis's words rippled through the crowd, criminal network exposed. Federal offense, not a single neighbor dared to breathe too loud. Even the birds seemed to vanish from the trees. Karen, however, was incapable of silence. "This is a setup," she shrieked, waving her clipboard like it was a sword. "You think you can just roll in here, claim federal jurisdiction, and intimidate me? I know my rights. I'll sue all of you. I'll sue this whole agency into the ground." Her voice cracked at the end, but she didn't notice. The agents moved fast. Two of them stepped forward, firm but calm. "Ma'am, you are obstructing a federal investigation. If you do not stand down immediately, we'll be forced to place you under arrest." Karen barked out a laugh. "Arrest me? For what, being a homeowner? Running an HOA? You people are clowns." But then Agent Davis raised his hand, signaling his team. Click. The sound of handcuffs snapping around her son's wrists echoed across the valley. He cried out, Mom, do something." Karen spun on them, eyes bulging. "Unhand him this instant."
"He's innocent."
But the agents ignored her. They read his rights calmly, efficiently, while the neighbors whispered in shock. One older man in the crowd muttered, "Guess the FBI don't care about HOA bylaws, huh?" A ripple of uneasy laughter followed. For the first time in years, the valley's residents found their courage. "About time someone put her in her place," Mrs. Hill whispered, clutching her husband's arm. "She's been stealing HOA dues for years," another said, louder now, testing their bravery. "She fined me $2,000 for painting my shutters cream instead of beige," someone else added bitterly. Soon the whispers grew into a chorus. Stories poured out. Threats, forged letters, fake citations, bogus fees. Agent Davis listened, his expression unreadable, but one of his men scribbled furiously in a notebook. Karen's face went crimson. "Lies, all of you. You're just jealous of my authority, jealous of my—" "No, Karen," a neighbor interrupted, his voice steady, clear. "We're not jealous. We're tired." For the first time, Karen faltered. Agent Davis finally spoke again, his tone heavy. "We've been watching this valley for a long time. What your son destroyed wasn't just government equipment. It was part of a long-term investigation into a trafficking ring that's been using these mountains as a corridor." The crowd gasped again. Karen blinked rapidly, her mouth opening and closing. "Tea trafficking? That's ridiculous. This is a peaceful community." Davis cut her off. "You've been so wrapped up in your false authority that you didn't even notice what was happening right under your nose. And worse, you interfered with it. You cost us valuable evidence. You jeopardized an operation." He stepped closer, voice lowering but carrying like thunder. "And you did it while stealing from your own neighbors." Karen flinched. I don't know what you're talking about." Davis nodded toward one of his agents, who pulled out a file. He flipped it open, revealing bank statements, fake HOA invoices, proof of embezzlement. Karen staggered back. That's fabricated. But the crowd wasn't buying it anymore. Not after years of abuse. Karen's son struggled in his cuffs, tears streaming. Mom, stop, just stop. They've got us. We're done. Don't you dare say that, she snapped. We're not done. We're fighters. We'll sue. We'll win. But her voice trembled. The clipboard slipped from her hands and hit the dirt. Neighbors stared. For years, that clipboard had been her weapon, her symbol of power. Seeing it lying there, useless, was like watching a tyrant's crown roll across the floor. Karen swayed on her feet. For a second, I thought she might faint. But instead, she collapsed to her knees, clutching her son's arm like he was her lifeline. Please, she whispered hoarsely. Please don't take him. He didn't know. He's all I have. The FBI agents didn't answer. They simply guided him toward the SUV. As Karen begged, the neighbors began to shift. For the first time in years, they weren't afraid. Someone stepped forward, then another. A group of residents gathered around me, their faces tired but relieved. You own this land, don't you? One asked quietly. I nodded. All of it. The whole valley, murmurs spread. Some smiled. Some looked on the verge of tears, then, does that mean? Yes, I said firmly. The HOA is gone. Effective immediately. The cheer that erupted wasn't loud, it was shaky, uncertain, like people testing freedom after too long in chains. But it grew, rising into the trees, echoing against the cabin walls. Karen lifted her head, eyes wide, horror dawning. No, you can't. You can't do this to me. But nobody listened anymore. Her reign was over. As the SUVs pulled away, carrying Karen's son in the back seat and Karen herself still kneeling in the dirt, Agent Davis paused beside me. You handled yourself well, he said quietly. But be ready. This isn't over, I frowned. What do you mean? He glanced at the cabin, then back at me. The people we were tracking, they won't take kindly to their operation being disrupted. You may have bought this valley, but now you'll need to defend it. His words sent a chill down my spine, because in that moment I realized the truth. Karen's downfall wasn't the end of the story. It was only the beginning.